Most people spend 90% of their time on the things they can't control and 10% of their time on the things that they actually can. The best leaders that I know flip that equation entirely. They spend 90% of their time on the things that they can control. Their attitude, their words, their actions, their inputs, the people in their influence, that's what they spend their time on. And 10% of their time on the things they can't control. And what is that 10%? Unlike everyone else, the things they can't control, they don't fill that with worry. I actually think the best leaders fill that with prayer. Focus on the things you can control. Pray for the things that you can't. So I left to start my business for many reasons, but one of the reasons a lot of people leave to start their own business, right? People say, I want to be my own boss. And that is such a gift and such a joy, right? To have that level of freedom and flexibility and to choose your own adventure and to go and build something, right? It's such a gift to be your own boss. But inevitably, there are stages, and this has happened to me multiple times, but I'll never forget the first time it happened, where it's like you feel like you're maybe stalling out or you're not expanding, you're not growing. You're like, man, the things that used to work aren't really working anymore. We're not expanding the business, or I'm not growing personally, or stuff like that. And then you realize, like, oh crap, I'm the boss. Like, it used to be like someone would tell you where you needed to grow, and someone would tell you where you need to move forward, and someone might even provide you with the whole path for doing that. And they'd give you a stack of books and say, you need to read these things, and if you just follow these steps, then you're going to grow and improve. And that was how you expand capacity. It was like someone gave the path to you. And part of the cost and responsibility associated with being your own boss is you are now the boss. And so if you are going to grow, you don't get to be a spectator to your growth. You're going to play a role in that happening. If your leadership capacity is going to expand, if you are going to be a better leader next year than you are today, which, good gosh, I hope that you are, then you're going to have to play part of that. You're going to make decisions that create actions that result in expanded leadership capacity. And that's really the impetus behind what we're going to walk through today.
So some of the points we have here, I said this before we started recording, like they can seem counterintuitive, or like if you read down the list, it could be like, oh, I don't have the time for that, or that, I have too much going on. Like why are the things that we are pointing out important, and how do they like really contribute to an increase in your long-term capacity and sustainability as a leader?
I'd go to the way we talk about and define leadership within our coaching community. We always say, if someone depends on you, then you are a leader. And so that means that by stepping into a leadership role, you're saying, man, people depend on me, right? I'm an elevator. I'm not neutral. I'm taking people up or I'm taking people down. And so with that, every single one of these actions to expand your leadership capacity has downstream effects to other people. And negligence is not an option, because if you neglect any of these 5 actions, I actually believe this, you will be taking people down, right? Other people will suffer the consequences of you not expanding your leadership capacity. There is no neutral here. So that's why it's like, we got to choose, right? Do we want to lead or not? And if we're saying we want to lead, it's going to look different at different stages, but we've got to reckon with these 5 actions that we're going to talk about today, and really the 5 decisions we're talking about today.
Yeah. Let's start with the first action.
Okay. The first action is the decision to take personal growth seriously. I can already see it. There's people listening to this. They're like, okay, moving on. I've got this one. Don't worry. They're like, dude, I'm listening to your podcast right now. I've got I read 5 books at a time, and they're all nonfiction personal growth books. I don't read any fiction books. And they've got all this list of habits and goals and things that they do that are personal growth oriented. And I get that. I love that. That's a lot of the people that we work with. That's me in so many ways, right? Like, I love the topic of personal growth. I think it's excellent, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking personal growth seriously. And what I mean by that is, so many of us, we establish all these habits and actions and gather up all these books and gather up all these podcasts. And it's all activities oriented around the things that we're already good at, the things we already like, and the things we already enjoy, right? Sometimes we engage with things we dislike. Rarely, if ever, do we proactively engage with the things that we fear. But what I want people to know is the single greatest growth in your life will come from proactively engaging with the topics, things, conversations, and activities that you fear. That's the type of discomfort that we're talking about here.
What's an example of a fear that you face when it comes to personal growth?
Oh, man. Well, I can give you where I learned this principle, right? Like, man, I was a personal growth junkie 6 or 7 years ago, right? Like junkie, was reading every single book under the sun, was doing all the habits, had my wake up routines. I mean, I was running sometimes multiple marathons a month, right? For multiple months in a row, right? And so I was just all in on personal growth, and people would look at me and you'd be like, oh my gosh, you're such a personal growth guy. You're doing all these things. Meanwhile, the thing that I feared was getting anywhere near the conversation related to dating and marrying a woman, right? Like I was like, I don't even know where to begin with all that. That's something that I fear. That's something that I don't want to engage with, right? And so I would do all these other things, and it was like all of this activity. Meanwhile, the thing that would, and I can say this confidently now, would have the single greatest impact on my growth as a human being, stepping into more of who I was created to be, was the very thing I was avoiding because I was afraid of it. And I was filling that avoidance with a bunch of activity that was keeping me busy. And so what's crazy is the more I started to recognize this principle, the greatest growth doesn't come from the things you dislike, it comes from the things you fear. The more I started to lean into that, and I literally went to a counselor, and before I would go into my counselor's office, I would sit in the car. I would get there 10 minutes before, and I would sit in the car, and I would say, what is the single most uncomfortable thing you could talk to Will about today? That's the question I would ask myself. And then I would always give myself an out. I would always say, like, there would always be an answer to that question, but I would always give myself an out. I would always say, you don't have to talk about that. You don't have to, but let's just label it, because the greatest growth comes from the greatest discomfort. So what's the single most uncomfortable thing you could talk to Will about today? And there would always be an answer, and then be like, dadgummit, I have to talk to you. Get out of the car. And the greatest growth always came from those conversations. And so that's an example of proactively engaging with discomfort that I really didn't want to, that has massively transformed my life.
How would someone identify what that fear is for themselves?
Oh man. I'd be interested to know your thoughts here. For me, it's like, I know it unless I choose not to know it. Right. And that I literally had someone ask me one time, and I got a little bit frustrated with them that, you know, they were asking me about my running and everything that I was doing and the number of marathons I was signed up for. This is 7 or 8 years ago. And he said, one more question for you. I said, what's that? He said, what are you running from? He's like, it feels like you're avoiding something. And I got kind of frustrated, quite frankly. I was like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I think he actually did. I think he was like hyper aware, right? Like there were elements of my life that were going neglected. And so I think we do know. Sometimes we know, but we choose not to know. And in that case, having good people that will ask you hard questions is really helpful. But do you have thoughts there?
I do. I was going through my notes the other day on my iPhone, just like shared iCloud notes. And I just realized I had a lot of like random things I had jotted down, like things to delete and things to organize. And at some point, I don't remember the date. I'll have to go back and check it maybe. At some point, I was listening to a podcast, a sermon, something, or just thinking, and I had jotted down the note, I'm afraid to be known because being known means I don't have all the answers. And it hit in that moment probably just as hard as it did, you know, the couple of years ago when I typed that out. And it was like, I think deep down when people really reflect on what their fear is, it's like that they know it intrinsically. Like if you take the time, you'll find it. And if you can't, maybe go to people who you've spent a lot of time with that will maybe help you pull that out.
Yeah. I was just at a business conference that, I'm going to be referencing this a lot just because it was so transformative for me. And it's one of the biggest investments that I've made in my personal growth in a long time. Keith Cunningham, he's 76 years old. He's been teaching this thing called the 4-day MBA for, 25 years now. But his story, his background is like he lost $100 million, hit rock bottom, had to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy after he thought he had climbed his way out, and then found out he owed the IRS $9 million still. And that's when he said, okay, I'm going to wave the white flag. lie. Like I can't do this anymore. Unbelievable. That was, 50 years ago, right? Since then, he's rebuilt his life. Like his net worth. He's one of those guys that's so baller he doesn't have to talk about his net worth. But you just, this guy. Whoa. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You've heard of that book.
Yeah.
He is the rich dad that Robert Kiyosaki based that book on, like crazy. And 76, this is the last time he's ever going to teach this course, he says, which is just wild. And I was there for it. And I was literally sat there and I was like, I'm in the room right now with a guy that is one of the, if not the best in the world at what he does. He was so good. There was so much about the 4 days that was just so good. But what was crazy to me is 3 days in, he set up this exercise, and it was a very simple exercise. He just said, I'm going to give you 9 questions, and I want you to choose 1 to 3. And he said, I'm going to give you the really good questions. And he's like, we're going to do thinking time. And he's like, I want you to scratch what itches. I want you to take a sip. He's like, we're locking the doors. No one comes in or out for 40 minutes. Like no one. And he's like, if you are in this room when we start, you will be in this room when you finish. He's like, I just want you to get to the bottom of this question for 40 minutes is what he kind of said. And he said, that's thinking time. What's crazy is, he says go. And it's like people taking the SAT. Like they just start writing, just start going. It was so cool. And then it felt like 3 minutes. He just goes, because he encouraged you to look at your paper the entire time, never look up. And then he just goes, and that's 40 minutes. And I kid you not, the reaction was people started clapping. And and then everyone went, whoa. And then he said, how many of you that was that valuable? And people just started going bonkers. And it's like, this guy has figured it out. He didn't have to teach anything. He just gave people space to think. And where you need to grow. That's what I would say. You know where you need to grow. Now, I can't on this podcast make you make space to think. You can do that though. You can lock yourself in a room and sit down in a chair. And I would encourage you to do it because it's very powerful.
And I feel like we could spend a whole episode on this, but we have 4 more decisions we need to get to.
Yeah,
so what's the next one?
The decision to be ruthlessly responsible, right? And what we're talking about here is responsibility for a very particular set of things. Most people spend 90% of their time on the things they can't control and 10% of their time on the things that they actually can. The best leaders that I know flip that equation entirely. They spend 90% of their time on the things that they can control. Their attitude, their words, their actions, their inputs, the people in their influence. That's what they spend their time on. And 10% of their time on the things they can't control. And what is that 10%? Unlike everyone else, the things they can't control, they don't fill that with worry. I actually think the best leaders fill that with prayer. Focus on the things you can control. Pray for the things that you can't, right? I also would recommend praying for the things that you can control too, because it turns out that really, really helps. But man, we have such a proclivity. I have such a proclivity to spend all of my time on the things that I can't control, that I can't ever be responsible for. And in doing so, I neglect the things that I am actually responsible for. And we need to flip that on its head. Hey, I hope you're getting value from this episode. I want to let you know that every week I put my best and clearest, most distilled thinking into one email. We call it Worth It Wednesday. Every Wednesday we spend a whole host of leaders, a principle worth learning, a question worth answering, and a recommendation worth taking, all focused on you practicing healthy growth in your business, leadership, and life. If you want to get on this email list, you can click the link below to sign up. Let's go.
I think social media and the news is a big contributor to that. I think there's a lot that we can focus on or get overwhelmed with that we have ultimately no control over. But ultimately, it's really a distraction is what it is. Yeah.
Aspen and I made a mistake of turning on the news the other night. and it was wild. We turned it on and it said, coming up at 5. And it's talking about someone that was, murdered horrifically in the middle of the night in an obscure neighborhood in New York City. And it's what is the utility of me knowing that? I need to know if someone, let's think historically, I need to know if someone in my village was murdered, right? I really need to know that. And there's ways for me to know that. And like, I need to care about that because that's something I can actually respond to.
Yeah.
I can make sure my family's safe. I can care for those that are grieving. I can actually do something. What am I going to do with the information and the knowledge that I now have about the person that got murdered in some, obscure neighborhood in New York that I am in no way connected to? I just build up all this anxiety and tension that can happen, but I have zero control. I have nothing I can do to respond. And so, yeah, I think it's good to kind of reduce our inputs to our village, because a lot of times, man, our village is entirely neglected because we're spending time figuring out what's going on in New York because we're watching the news. And so, yeah, focus on what we can control and be ruthlessly responsible for those things. That's a decision.
What does it look like to be ruthlessly responsible?
Well, we teach a team training. It's probably our most popular team training that we've given. It's certainly the one that I've delivered the most for teams of like 30 or 40 around the country. And it's called ownership mentality. It's directly related. We always say that an ownership mentality is the decision to be ruthlessly responsible for the things you can control. And then we say, okay, what can you control? Your motive, your role, the solution, and your influence. So your motive, why are you doing what you're doing? Guard your heart above all else, for out of it flows everything you do, right? That's a command, right? Guard is a verb. That means you've got to make the decision that I'm going to be responsible for my heart. Like, God, purify my motives. Make sure that I'm doing what I'm doing for the right reasons, right? Your role. What are the results at work and at home that when you win in those areas, the whole wins, right? Like, we know what those are, and we've got to be ruthlessly responsible for those things. The solution, when you see problems that come in your purview, you've got to be ruthlessly responsible for finding solutions. I heard this practical example. It's a little bit of a framework or a tactic the other day. I thought it was good. They said, train your team 1-2-1, right? I want you to come to me with the problem or the decision that needs to be made. That's the 1. 2 possible options of what we could do about it, and 1 recommendation of what you think we should do, right? That's someone on your team owning their responsibility, right? Really making the decision to be ruthlessly responsible. And then your influence. We've already talked about this a little bit. You're taking people up or you're taking people down. And so you've got to own where you're taking people, and you can't just, say, well, I'm just a direct person. So, if they don't like that, they just have to deal with it. That's you not owning your influence, is what I would say. That, I think, is practically what it looks like to be ruthlessly responsible.
Let's talk about the next topic, which is just as light, our weaknesses.
Yeah. The decision to own weaknesses. And the word I would hit on there is own, because I think when it comes to our weaknesses, these are the things you're bad at. And quite frankly, you're probably always going to be bad at it. And that's okay. There are things that you will probably this side of heaven not be very good at. And if you deny that, then you're the person I'm most worried about, right? So when it comes to our weaknesses, we've got 3 options. Option 1, I hope you're not taking part in. Option 1 is you're avoiding it. It's interesting. The area where I see this happening most with business owners is the area where it's also most damaging, which is crazy. I'm not a numbers person, right? Numbers are a weakness for me. So I'm going to avoid the numbers entirely and just I'm not going to look, I'm not going to get a P&L, or I'm not going to look at the P&L. I'm not going to exert what it takes to understand a cash flow report. I'm not going to take the steps to get a 6-month rolling cash flow forecast. I'm not going to do any of that because I'm not a numbers guy. This is why this is about expanding your leadership capacity. There are other people that will experience the consequences of that really bad decision-making process to avoid your weakness, right? And so if you're going to be a business owner, you don't get to say, I'm not a numbers person, so I'm just not going to pay attention. Like, part of your job is to know the numbers. And if that's uncomfortable, if you're weak at that, it just means we've got to own that and figure out a way to move forward. Now, here's the next thing people do. Some people avoid. The next step is we acknowledge. And this is where a lot of people cap off, is they say, oh, that's a weakness for me. And they say, I'm just disorganized. I'm a disorganized leader. That's a weakness for me. And so they just basically say, we're going to be a disorganized organization, or everything around me in the organization is going to be disorganized because I'm disorganized, right? And that's acknowledging it, but there's nothing productive, constructive, or forward moving about that. And you will cap out if all you do is acknowledge your weakness. The final thing is to actually own your weakness. And when we own our weakness, what we do is we say, I am either going to grow in this area because I have to, or I'm going to hire for this area. I'm going to hire my weaknesses, or I'm going to delegate this. But acknowledging and then just saying that's just the way that it is not an option. That is not what we're going to do. Expanding your leadership capacity always involves owning your weaknesses.
Well, and you brought up the numbers conversation. I feel like one of the things that has been most compelling to me and interesting to see is CFO, bookkeeping, accounting services that do a good job at breaking what's complicated down into a way that a business owner who's not good at numbers can actually see and understand, right?
Yes.
They don't have to be an expert, but it's like, oh, there are a plethora of companies out there that you could go to that are like, we're expert at this and we're good at breaking it down into a way that you actually understand, so that you don't have to be good at numbers, but you still have to like understand, like here are the key metrics that you need to understand, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's what's crazy is most business owners think I should have this. I have to have this. And they feel a lot of shame associated with the fact that they're like, I see these reports and I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know which way is up from down, right? And but like literally all I do when I look at my financial reports is look at the bottom and see if it's red or black. And that's all I do, right? And they feel bad about that. And then they feel afraid to tell anyone about that. And so what they'll say is, I need to figure all this stuff out on my own so then I can work with a fractional CFO or something. It's like, that's like saying, hey, I'm going to go make sure I get healthy so I can go to the doctor. That's just crazy, right? Yeah. Like we don't do that, right? You go to the doctor because you're like, I need to get better at this. And owning your weaknesses looks like outsourcing. It looks like getting someone you trust. Now with finances in particular, like the biggest thing is you got to know that people aren't going to take advantage of what you don't understand, and that they're also going to have the heart of a teacher. And that right there is why we have an incredible partnership with Fulling Management and Accounting, right? Like, which we'll put the link to their organization in the show notes of this episode, because they provide accounting and fractional CFO work for business owners and leadership teams. But I have known Rusty for almost a decade now. Like I just trust the guy implicitly.
Salt of the earth.
Oh my gosh. Just like one of the best people on the planet. And his team is the same way. They're just such solid people. And they have a heart of a teacher. They are not good with like, I understand this, but you're not going to understand this because you just can't get it. No, like they're like, hey, we are going to over time increase your understanding of the lifeblood of your business, which is profitability, so that you can make good decisions about how your business grows and moves forward, which is just so good. So if someone's looking for that, I could not recommend Fulling Management and Accounting more highly.
You built this business to make an impact, but now the business needs you everywhere. Every decision, every approval, every fire. The business grew, so did your stress. Healthy growth creates capacity, so the business can carry more without bottlenecking through you. We built the 12 Fundamentals Assessment so that you can see what's strong, where the business has real momentum, and what's strained in your business and leadership. Not only that, it'll even point you towards the next right step. Take the free assessment at 12fundamentals.com.
What are some practical approaches to like identifying and eliminating an area where you experience shame?
That acronym has always been helpful for me. Shame, should have already mastered everything, is naming it, right? Like, oh man, I should have that already. If you feel yourself saying I should, or I need to, or man, I can't believe I haven't, a lot of times that's shame language, right? Not all the time, but a lot of time. What I've had to grow in is I cannot consciously be aware of shame first. That's not what happens. I don't just like sit there in a conversation and I'll be like, I'm experiencing shame right now.
Right.
What I have gotten really good at realizing is like, man, my neck just got really tight, or my shoulders just got really up high, or my breathing just got really shallow. Or there was a whole season of business ownership for me where it's weird. Like my left side would just start to ache a little bit, and I would know like I better start paying attention. What's crazy is I have learned my body has been giving me those signals for a very long time. I just started paying attention to them. And then I started to be like, what is going on right now? And a lot of times for me, it can be shame that's driving those by. And then I can start to say, okay, what's the story I'm telling myself? And how does that story interact or contradict with truth? And then you start to breathe through truth and you start to feel your shoulders go down and you start to make better decisions. Emotions grip our brain. And if emotions go unaddressed, like we don't identify them, then they're in the driver's seat. And so it's really helpful to know what shows up physiologically when you're experiencing emotions, because if you can name it, literally, there's been neuroscientists that have done incredible work that suggests the minute you label an emotion, it reduces its effect on your cognitive abilities. So helpful to be aware of.
I'm a breath holder.
You hold your breath?
When I'm stressed or when I'm holding something emotionally, I realize I'm holding my breath.
Oh, that's not your solution.
No,
that's what you
that's like my physiological response to things sometimes. So
I know if Ben ever turns purple in a conversation.
Probably being underwater a lot had something to do with that.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy cow, that's interesting.
All right. What's the fourth decision?
Yeah, the fourth one is very much getting into a path for growth, a uniquely path for growth way of thinking about business leadership and life, I would say. But I also think it's right. So I think we're going to share it, right? It's the decision to define success as faithfulness. I mean, it might have been 9 years ago now. It was about 9 years ago that I really wanted to be the host of the EntreLeadership podcast. And there were some things going on that they were not making me the host of the EntreLeadership podcast. And I started to get a little bit irritated about that and like was a little bit impatient. But then, praise God, some of that impatience kind of transferred into, okay, what can I do productive in this season? I don't have exactly what I want, but what can I do? Spoiler alert, I ended up eventually becoming the host of the EntreLeadership podcast, which was just an amazing experience. But in this in-between time, I kind of looked myself in the mirror and I said, well, what does everyone in the organization say? They always say, like, don't wait for someone to give you the job, just start doing it. And I couldn't just take the microphone. That wouldn't go too well. So what I said is like, why am I waiting to interview remarkable people? Why don't I just start interviewing people right now? And so I set out a monthly challenge for myself where I said, I put this out on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. I said, over the course of the month of March, I want to interview 17 people. And I just want to know a few things. I want to get to know you. I want to understand your story. And I want to get past surface level as fast as possible. Those are my 3 objectives. And oh my gosh, had so many interesting conversations. 17 people, we did this. Strangers, people I hadn't talked to since high school. It was crazy. To make a long story short, one of the questions that I asked every single person was, how do you define success? And what's crazy is every single person I talked to, I would say was chasing success. Only one person out of the 17 that I talked to had an actual definition and didn't hem and haw and like make stuff up. Some people literally, ended up saying, I think success is just what makes you happy. And I was like, that is a very insufficient answer to like something that you're basing your life around is success. And the person that had the answer was a guy named Dan. He's a mentor and friend of mine. He pastors a church in Austin called Cornerstone. And I said, Dan, how do you define success? And he didn't even skip a beat. He said, did I do what God said? Period. Or question mark. Yeah, so good, right? And what that is success equals faithfulness, which is so good because everyone else that I interviewed that month, and myself included, was setting themselves up for frustration and disappointment because success for them was related to circumstance or it was related to outcome that they might have been able to influence, but they could not fully control those outcomes, or it was related to things that were entirely out of their control. And also it was related to things that God never asked of you, right? God asked us for faithfulness. That's what he asked for us. And Dan was the one that actually got that and put words to it. Did I do what God said?
That answer is so far from flashy.
Yeah, that's right. That's so true.
All right. What's the 5th decision?
5th decision is the decision to surrender. This is also very counterintuitive and like, what? Like, there's certain conferences that you will never hear the word surrender ever uttered ever. But like, I think it goes in alignment with faithfulness. It goes in alignment with calling. It goes in alignment with like, man, if I want to expand and grow as a leader, I got to really know in my bones, this business that I lead, this is not my business. This is God's business. And then let's get a little bit even more challenging, convicting, uncomfortable. This life is not my life. This life is God's life, right? That like I've been chosen to steward. And when you start to view yourself less as a hero and more as an instrument, then you become an instrument that he's able to use. And when you become an instrument that God can use, well, then what you're going to find is your capacity expands, because he who can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. And so a lot of us, the struggle, disappointment, challenge, and I'm certainly not immune to this, that we experience is related to the fact that we're still scratching and clawing for my life to be my own. And the areas where it's like, man, God can have all of that. He just can't have this. I need to control this. That's the area where you're going to experience the most stress. And it's also the area where you're limited because you're relying on human willpower. I had a friend that used to tell me, Alex, willpower is no power, right? God is ready and willing to give you everything, that more than everything you need, more than anything you can ask, think, or imagine, but he gets to own it. And a lot of times we don't want to give him that.
Man, I feel like that just cascades back onto the other four things that we've talked about, like surrender. Like if you're focused or you're making the decision on personal growth, you're probably surrendering a lot of time to other things, like in the effort to increase your capacity and your ability to be a healthy leader. Like if you're being ruthlessly responsible, like you're surrendering the things that you know you can't control so you can focus on the things, you know, in weaknesses. Like you're surrendering the reality that you're human, like you're acknowledging it, right? You're surrendering the reality that you're not perfect. There are things that you need to work on, things you just can't do, and you need other people and God to help you like bridge those gaps. And then in faithfulness, like you're ultimately you're just surrendering the fact that like
my job is not these outcomes. My job is faith. Like sow the seeds.
Yeah,
exactly. Do the next right thing. That's so good. I haven't honestly thought about that, but I do think it sums up what we're talking about with all of these, and it's how you make sure all of these are actually healthy too. Because I mean, you can take any podcast we've ever done, you could take and be like, I'm going to retool this and reframe this for my own glory, or something like that, and surrender hamstrings you from being able to do that. Right? I've been spending time in Colossians lately. In Colossians, there's one of the most epic descriptions of Jesus that there could possibly be. It says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. In him, all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, rulers or authorities. And then it says, all things were created by him and for him. All things were created by him, but also all things were created for him. That I actually think like when it says all things, it means like all things, like everything, right? Very applicable to what we're in right now with AI. AI was created. God's not like, what is this new thing they figured out? It's like, no, he's not surprised, right? All things were created by him, and also all things were created for him. And when we throw up our hands and say, I'm going to stop trying to orient these resources, these good things, these created things that God gave me, I'm going to stop trying to orient these towards my glory and start aiming it at what it's actually for, which literally it says he created it for him. Everything just gets way better, like way better is what I would say.
Well, we're going to end on that.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. If you want more content like this, we've got some killer stuff planned. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Let's go, let's go, let's go.